Kanche. Welcome. Bienvenue à Batoche.
I hope that you won't be shy. This is a wonderful opportunity for the two communities to talk together and share what it means to be Métis and Francophone and the challenges that represents. And the idea is to be honest. I hope we won't fall into sort of platitudes and think that we have to be politically correct. But I hope that we all understand that we want to be respectful and constructive and be honest at the same time. So I think I've said everything I needed to say. This is a special occasion, and I hope that we'll have a useful and stimulating and respectful conversation. So as I said, we have two co-facilitators, Marilyn Poitras and Francine Proulx-Kenzle, and I'll present them briefly to each of you, to all of you, and then Francine and Marilyn are going to present briefly the people who are seated around the table, and then we'll start with our roundtable discussion. Marilyn Poitras is originally from Indian Head. Marilyn is Métis, Saskatchewan born and raised. She is a constitutional lawyer with an expertise in Aboriginal law and cultural relations. She teaches and has designed programs in Nunavut and Saskatchewan around the Indigenous communities' identified interests, needs, and priorities. Marilyn's institutional education includes a law degree from the University of Saskatchewan and a master's in law from Harvard Law School. However, her real lessons come from her work with Indigenous people across Canada, ancient knowledge keepers, social entrepreneurs, and those close to her. Marilyn. Thank you, Marilyn, for agreeing to facilitate the roundtable. Francine Proulx-Kenzle est native de Rimouski, Québec. Francine est déménagée avec sa famille dans la région de Prince-Albert à l'âge de 11 ans. Elle a habité à Prince-Albert, Albertville, Meath Park, Calgary et maintenant Regina. Elle a été administratrice rurale pour la RM of Garden River, aviseur aux municipalités pour le gouvernement provincial, directrice adjointe à l'Assemblée communautaire fransaskoise et maintenant directrice adjointe responsable pour les relations communautaires à l'Institut français. Francine est très impliquée dans la communauté fransaskoise et a siégé comme élue à l'Assemblée communautaire fransaskoise, le Conseil de l'École fransaskoise de Prince-Albert et le Conseil général des écoles fransaskoises. Merci Francine d'avoir accepté, toi aussi, de faciliter cette table ronde aujourd'hui. Donc je vais vous... So I'm going to hand things over now to Marilyn and Francine, who will introduce our special guests, and then we'll start our roundtable. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to cold Saskatchewan in the middle of August. And this is a character-building exercise, and so for those of you with only one personality, I promise you'll leave with at least 3 by the time we last this wind out, okay? I'm very happy to be here. I was honored to be asked to help facilitate today, and we're going to start by some introductions of the panelists. In the true nature of Métis, we're being a little bit obstinate. It's actually a square table. It's not a round table. So I think that's just a representative of who we are and what we stand for. So we're going to start with Rita Bouvier. And if I could just get you to give a wave so people can see where you're sitting when you answer the question. Thank you, Rita. Rita Bouvier's roots are in the village of Ville-la-Crosse in northern Saskatchewan. She presently lives in Saskatoon and works at the Aboriginal Learning and Knowledge Centre at the University of Saskatchewan. She's well known in the Métis community for her contribution to various organizations such as the Northern Governance Task Force, Gabriel Dumont Institute of Native Studies and Applied Research, the Independent Oversight Committee on Métis Elections Saskatchewan, Iskweewak Ewechitachik. I had a Cree lesson all the way up here yesterday, so I would say that properly. Iskweewak Ewechitachik, Women Working Together, formerly known as Missing Aboriginal Women, to name a few of the things that she's working on right now. So thank you, Rita, for agreeing to be here. Terry Boyer is the next person at the table, and Terry, formerly known as Gabriel Dumont, because he's role-played and done some acting, and you met Terry last night. So just to refresh your memories about who he is, he lives in I didn't practice my French on the way up here yesterday, so Saint-Laurent-de-Grandin, just north of Batoche, and happens to be his grandfather's river lot. Works for the provincial government as a social worker now for 37 years, and also does some private contracting work. He's active in promoting the Métis culture through a variety of organizations such as Canadian Métis Heritage Corporation, Saskatchewan Métis Wagon Adventures, Métis Homeland Batoche Local 51, and Gabriel Dumont Institute. Welcome, Terry.
Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning. I'm very, very happy to be here. It's really a great honor to participate in this roundtable session. I'll continue with the presentation. Lucille Georget. Lucille was born in PA, grew up in Dorrington region, and she lived in Church River near Prairie for 2 years. She celebrated 40 years of marriage. She worked in a health system. She worked at the Walker Hospital for 20 years. She works at the community center, a fransaskoise community, as a development officer in Dorrington.
Next, we have Simone Laliberté. Simone was born and educated in Beauval, Saskatchewan. She lived in Selkirk, Manitoba for 14 years of her adult life. And when she was in her 30s, she moved back to Beauval, where she raised her children, worked, and contributed to her community. She's presently employed by Northern Village of Beauval as a coordinator of Community Reference Panel, doing advocacy work around children and families in need of service. Thanks, Simone, for coming.
We have Benoit Perret, born La Plaine, a small village between Ruston and Duck Lake. He will have 80. He'll be 80 this year. It's a farmer to age 36, where he went back to school, the University of Saskatchewan, to finish his BA and another certificate. He taught for 21. He took retirement in 89. Alors, thank you, Monsieur Perret.
Now we've got a couple of youth on our panel as well, and I'd like to introduce to you Scott Langlois. Scott grew up in Prince Albert and is an active member of his community there. He works with several different children's groups and with senior citizens. He's a student at Suntep in Prince Albert, studying education. He's looking forward to his convocation next year and starting a career in Saskatchewan as a teacher. So welcome, Scott. Besides Scott, we have Susan McKenzie. She's a Red River Métis who grew up in La Ronge and is now residing in Rostern. With her experience in Aboriginal media, arts, and culture, Susan has contributed to various projects in Aboriginal Métis communities, including developing a youth program for crystal meth education, organizing the first Métis Cultural Festival in La Ronge, and she is currently employed as a coordinator at the Batoche National Historic Site, so she will be a familiar face to some of you. Thanks for coming, Susan. Next, we have Ed Bruce. If you want to just give a wave there, Mr. Bruce. Ed was born in Bellevue in 1933 and moved to Batoche when he was 25 years old. Some of you are madly doing math in your head. I wonder how old this guy is right now. He had a long, rewarding career working as a visitor activity supervisor at the Batoche National Historic Site in 1961, and there he met all cultures. In 1994, he retired from the park and moved to St. Louis. One of his passions is horses, competing in chuck wagon and chariot races, and winning.
À côté de Monsieur Bruce, c'est Adèle. Monsieur Bruce is Adèle, who came from graduated from Saint-Isidore de Bellevue. She was also a guide at the National Historic Guide of Batoche. Adèle plays the violin. We heard her yesterday. She was excellent musician. She is really interested in theater. She's following drama at the university in Ottawa currently. Paul-Émile L'Heureux, who's teach French and the arts. He's retired. He's a farmer since he's been a farmer for 30 years. He is also involved in the Assemblée communautaire for the fransaskoise people. Sophie Ferré, yes, it is called. Sophie, born in Saskatoon, graduated from a French Canadian school. She has a graduate in social science and from University of Ottawa. For social issues. She is president of the youth organization here for Saskatchewan. Thank you, Sophie. And then, lastly, Monsieur Henri Gareau, that completes our square. Monsieur Gareau, born in Bellevue, it works as agriculture in the area. It's in his blood. He is really involved in the community. He was a member of the Association Communauté Fransaskoise, represented Batoche, Bellevue, Saint-Laurent with the Municipal Council for St. Louis for about 12 years. And since 2006, he's the chief. He is the person in charge of the rural community. He is also a member of the Cultural Association of Bellevue. Thank you, Henri. So here we are. Welcome to all. What we'll do is we'll start to ask you a question that's fairly vague, but still we believe that it will really reveal what you have in your heart. What does it mean for me? What does it mean to be Francophone? What does it mean for me to be Métis? So we ask you to simply say who is going to be the first person to jump in to talk about this meaning. We want to share who we are to better understand each other at the end of the discussion.
Add that I think that it's important to remember that there's all kinds of personalities in the room, and there's going to be some of you who like to get to know each other a little bit better before you start to jump in with some of the stuff that's a little closer to your heart. There are some people who are prepared to just speak right now about issues that are really important. There are people who are here looking for information, and there are people who are here looking for answers and solutions and how are we going to move forward. So those are all great reasons to be here, and it's why we are all here. So just remember that when you're listening, you have your own way of listening, and you have your own way of participating in this, and we want to make room over the next day for everybody to have a chance to participate and for everybody to be heard. So whatever we can do to facilitate that. And I want to add something to my bio that I feel personally is kind of hanging in the air here. I have been working for the last year on the election issues in Saskatchewan for the Métis Nation Saskatchewan. And because we don't want to turn this into a political box in any way, but we definitely want to acknowledge that we are in the midst of a bit of a political crisis in Saskatchewan, and not to ignore that or put that aside, but not to sort of breathe it back into life here. And I think that it's something that's sort of around us and involves what we say and who we talk to. So just to bring that out and put it in the middle of the room and say, we know it's here, and we're dealing with it. And as a result of having some political turmoil, of course, we don't have a lot of forums in Saskatchewan for the Métis community to be voicing a lot of the issues that are bothering us. So today what we're going to do is find some, hopefully some relationships with the Francophone community so that we can say, what's your experience in that community in dealing with some of these issues and how can we move forward on that, as well as things that we will talk about in terms of relationships among our groups together. So just to put that out there right off the bat, and then to invite some conversation, and as Francine said, we'll go back and forth with the table and with the audience. So just again, we need our participants to press the button on their microphone so they can, when they participate, and to shut it off when they're not, so the wind isn't giving us some feedback. And to start with the question of who are you as a Métis person? What does it mean in your community? And if we've got anybody that's jumping up and down and can't wait to talk, it'll warm you up, okay? You'll get warm if you get to speak. That's the incentive.
I'm Benoit Perret, and I'm a proud Canadian. Saying said that, I'm also a proud French Canadian, which I speak my language. Whenever I meet someone that's French, we totally switch to French. What is back in my background that I found that hurt me sometimes way back, when you used to fill a form and you used to say, what's your nationality? I was so proud to put down, I'm French Canadian. And lately they took that root away from me, that I'm French. Like that one of the speakers said last night, be proud what you are. And that's where we have to start. We're proud that I'm French. You're proud that whatever you stand for in life, where your parents brought you to be. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Perret. À partir de vos parents.
Good morning to everyone. I'm going to speak in English, and maybe there'll be opportunity for me to speak in the language that I grew up with later, but I'll have to do simultaneous translation for everyone, I think. But for the moment, this is because English has been the language that I have had to use for work. It's the one that I feel most conversant in at the very moment, and so that's where I want to start. I think the question you've put in front of us is complex and yet simple. And so I want to start at a personal level, first of all, in terms of my own identity as a Métis woman. As far back as I can remember, I was born into the community of Île-à-la-Crosse, and the history of that region, of course, shapes my identity. I was raised by my grandparents on an island on the lake in Île-à-la-Crosse, and I lived on that island with my family, and I mean my extended family. My aunts and my uncles lived on that island along with my grandmother and my grandfather. And it is also the way in which the rest of the community was structured. You knew where the Lalibertés lived. You knew where the Daignons lived. You know where the Aubuchon family lived. And this is where the Gardner family lived. And so we lived closely, working, I guess, interdependently, if you would call it that. And we were also a community. And so my memory of that place has shaped me as a Métis person. Growing up in that community, we were the dominant members of that community. And so I have to say that I did not have an identity crisis, so to speak, because I knew I was Métis. Were there identity issues as I moved south to get an education? For sure, and which takes me to this complexity of what I started to say. simple and yet complex. I think that in order to understand who we are as Métis people in the broader national, global context, and I'm speaking internationally, I think Paul Chartrand's comments this morning reinforced for me that we have to, we are shaped, our identity is also shaped by our history and the history of this place. And if we neglect to go as far back as we can to the history of this place and the people who lived here, I am talking about the indigenous people of this place, we do ourselves a disservice in talking not only about our own identity, but also our relationships with each other. And I think we need to be frank as well that we are, this is a colonized place. And with that, of course, has been the central issue related to that from the beginning until the present day has been the issue of land. And so it's very central to my community. And so while I say I was shaped simply by my family and the music and the laughter and the stories of where we came from, I was also shaped by the story of this country and as far as I was not there at 2005 when the event first occurred between the Métis and the Francophone. So I have no sense of what happened there. And so when I think forward about, you know, the kind of relationship we might forge, I think it has to be with the awareness of that complex history. We need to acknowledge what is that relationship. I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you, Rita. Paul-Émile?
Merci. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire les francophones? Ça veut dire
That means different things for different people. I see in Saskatchewan, in the lineage, it's difficile to know what we are. But for personally, I suggest that I'm has never been as proud as I am today. When I was younger, my family, my brothers and sisters, sometimes were not proud of being Francophone. But we realized that we're in an English-speaking ocean, and the way we were brought up, it was not difficult because there are lots of Francophones around. But at a certain point, we did not want to be identified with the Francophone community. We didn't want to have an accent. We wanted to, above all, to fit in. We didn't want to be identified as Froggies or Frenchies. Frankie, you only happened to me a couple of times, but I was called, Frenchie, what are you doing? And that didn't affect me that much, but I know that there were some of us who didn't like it. The community where I live now, in the northwest of the province, I think that there's still a lot of people, especially young people, who are just like I was when I was a teenager, so not really proud of being French-speaking. It depends on the situation. When we're with our friends and family, when you come and go to the movies, to go to a party, two Francophones will speak English. Or between brothers and sisters, I hear that all the time. That's difficult, and it's difficult in Saskatchewan. Here we're in a community with Francophones, so it's difficult for us to keep our language. And the solution, I'm going to leave that for others to say. Thank you, Paul-Émile. Is somebody else who would like to add something to his life, his experience? Sophie. I'd like to add something to what Paul-Émile said and what Sari said too yesterday evening. I really liked what you said. For me, that's the key to being a Francophone. It's to like something into one thing. It's the feeling that's what you are, who you are. Excuse me. I have two things to say. It's about the presentation yesterday evening. I see in the fransaskoise community, we joined an organization. I couldn't count the number of organizations there are in the communities, and I'm fransaskoise. I think it's difficult to go to all sides, to do everything. To be in all aspects of my life as a Francophone, to be Francophone, it's the matter of language, and that transcends all aspects of my life. And I had real difficulty in concentrate what I was doing on one particular thing because I wanted to do everything, and I wanted to live as a Francophone everywhere I went, everywhere I am. And it's a bit my challenge as a Francophone to be able to live it to the maximum level possible. Merci beaucoup.
Susan?
Bonjour. Hello, my name is Susan McKenzie, and I just wanted to start by talking about my bio a little bit because it's misinformation in my bio. I was born in a place called Red Lake, Ontario. My father, who was here just left this morning, his name is Alan McKenzie. My mother is Martha Mahar. She's from the East Coast in Nova Scotia. I think it's really important that I share a little bit about my background and to say, first and foremost, I wanted to honor the elders that were here that had brought me to this place today. I wanted to take this time to say, Maria, I love you and respect you, and I am very grateful for the teachings and the lessons. And also you just taking in my family and being kind and generous to us, as well as the other elders who had pushed me along to help me get here to Batoche and here at this table. Once again, I was born in Red Lake, Ontario. I was raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I was raised by my mother, my Irish mother, whom I love and respect very much. And I had a difficult childhood. I grew up downtown Winnipeg. I still consider myself a downtown Winnipeg girl. We lived in Winnipeg at a time when there was a number of people coming in from the reserves and so forth, the Desjardins or Desjardins and Morsettes, and all these families were coming into the cities, and these are the people that I grew up with on Good Street by the Hudson Bay Company. I was very fortunate in many ways to become involved in the arts, and I was involved in the theater group called Red Bruce Theater, and it was there where I found a voice. It is there where I found, with a number of other individuals, Monica Marks, Louis Obi-Mao, I was able to find a sense of identity and a sense of community. And that is very important because in many ways I have a homeland in terms of where I am and who I am now, but as I was growing up, I didn't have a sense of the Métis Nation. And so it has taken a number of years and to get to where I am now, which is quite amazing because I work at Batoche. I work at Batoche National Historic Site. And so I've kind of had a lot of different growing pains in trying to find out who I am, and one of the things that I noticed about my son Modeste behind me is that he was making a lot of racket, and I could hear him even though I had these on, but he was jigging. His foot is constantly jigging, he's always dancing, and I thought, wow, what a place to be. Here we are, and this is what my son is learning. And I guess that was important for me to start with the introduction because we've come a long way. And regardless of where we come from, the teachings and the elders and the experiences and the land itself will teach us. And so I just wanted to share that and say thank you very much for allowing me to participate. And it's such an honor to be here and to listen to the stories and see the emotion and love and respect that everyone has for their own cultures, and as well I hope that's expanded and extended so we learn to respect the diversity within the two communities and celebrate it as well. So thank you.
Bonjour. Excuse-moi, je dis. Discuter des bouquettes, ben on Proulx sera bon d'être là.
I'll tell you where I come from so that you can understand what it is. I come from Saint Laurent, not far from here. I started school there when I was 6. I couldn't speak English at all. The first day of school, I wondered what I was doing there. And I tried to act as if I was sick. The teacher sent a small note to my parents. It said, je pense que le petit...
I think he's lonesome. On the way home, I knew there was something in that letter that I didn't want my mom to see. So I dropped that note on the way home. She went to the store that later on that day, she found that damn note. And she came back and she said, "You had a rough day at school." No. She said, "I found the note." I said, "Oh." That was the introduction to the English language for me. What does it mean for me to be Métis? It meant family. Real strong family, as much as we have around here. We talk with the Francophone community, they have a strong family ties. We went through school at Formont for 7 years, I guess. We had a couple of years that we went to BC, but we came back. And everything was just lovely. Everything was grand. We had a good time. When I went to grade 8 in St. Louis, again, there was a lot of Métis people there. We had an okay time. It was later that this thing called racism started to spring forth. We did not really understand it. We weren't really prepared for it. I remember the first overt time that it happened. I was at a party in Melfort, Saskatchewan. And some guy came over to me and said, "We don't have your people here." And I didn't know what he meant. And I got asked to leave. To my benefit, there were some friends that were there, and they said, "If he leaves, we leave." And that started that whole balance, that there's some people that feel a particular way that you have to accept. You don't necessarily have to completely accept it in your soul, but they have a right to an opinion. There's some of those opinions you can't change. And it started a long journey of trying to sort out who are the people you want to be around, who are the people that you want to be associated with. And that's been my journey. And now I see it through the eyes of my child who's now 7. And we talk about who can you associate with that you'll grow up to have a really good outlook in life, and that you can be proud of who you are. And I'm damn proud to be a really strong Métis person, man in this community right now, just as Sophie's proud to be Francophone. It brings my heart to tears to hear her speak so passionately as we speak passionately for our people as well. Thank you.
Oui, Lucille.
C'est mon tour à parler un petit peu passionnément de notre fierté d'être français. Toute ma vie, j'étais...
All my life, I was proud of being French speaking. It was very emotional for me. With my family, we lived with my mother and father, Gareau at that time, all our cousins, and a good understanding between us. We always had music and dancing, and we uncles played music. And when it was a waltz, it came very quietly. It was beautiful. When it was a polka or a two-step, it was the same music, but faster. It was really great. We sang with that, and then I always thought that we're all the same, because we talked a little differently. We were Aunt Sue spoke French differently from my uncle. My uncle spoke a little differently from my aunts and cousins, and some said papa, and others said papa. We understood each other, and we loved each other. In St. Louis, we also learned that there were some really nice grandchildren which were dark eyes, and there others spoke differently. I never thought that we were so different. I would never have thought that. But when we had the chance to move to White Fox, there was a very big difference, because there were people who didn't like us because we spoke differently, and that really upset me. That was the first time that I really felt that we weren't liked, that there was something else different about being French. Ever since then, I have been proud to be French, and I'm always going to have that. And in getting older, in the work that I've done, I've found that it's wonderful to be able to speak French, and I'm proud of that. And I'm proud today. Thank you. Thank you. Simone.
Good morning. Okay, good morning, everybody. When you first asked the question, what does it mean to be Métis? I had to really think about it, and because unlike Rita, she always knew her identity. I struggled with mine for a long time, because when I was growing up, the nuns taught us that we were nobody. Like, we weren't First Nations, we weren't white, we were half-breeds. So I struggled with that for a long time. I worked hard on myself and really studied, like, in my heart, what does it mean to be Métis? And today I can say I'm a very proud Métis, proud of our distinct culture. And I'm teaching my children and grandchildren today really be proud of who we are. We're special people. And when I was first asked to come here, I'm a replacement, by the way. I wasn't the first choice, but when I was asked to come here, I asked myself, what can I contribute to this group? Like, I'm just an old grandma from northern Saskatchewan, and I'm not a political person. I'm not an expert on Métis history. All I can offer is how I grew up Métis. And like Terry, I couldn't speak a word of English when I started school. I spoke Métis, and I still do today. I remember our first day of school, we were taught by nuns. And my older sisters were teaching me a few English words because they were in school already. And they said the first question the nuns will probably ask you is, what's your name? And the second question might be, how old are you? So I went to school the first day, just really proud, ready for any questions. So the nun asked me a question. I said, Simone Laliberté. And everyone started laughing. And then she asked me another question. I said, 6 years old. I guess I got the questions backwards. But anyway, I speak my language, and I don't think it'll be possible for anybody to translate my language the way it is today in my community, because we integrate 3 languages into one. Like, we use Cree, French, and what is the other one mentioned? Like, this started in Pine House, our neighboring community. They would say, like, parking, we'd say parko yak. That means we were parked. Dans l'église means church. So we integrate 3 languages, and we like having fun. We like dancing, jigging, and laughing about ourselves, making fun of ourselves, not in a bad way, but that's how we heal. Because we, I don't know, we had hard times, hard struggles, but that's all in the past. I think now we have to move forward as a Métis nation. We have strong leaders in northern Saskatchewan. We have people like Max Morin, Alex Maurice, who is the mayor of Beauval. He's a strong advocate for Métis, to promote our culture, to be proud of who we are, to teach our children that you be proud to be Métis. I guess our first annual Métis Cultural Festival is going to be happening the end of this month, and I'm very emotional about that, because the people who fought for our Métis rights are almost all gone now. They're passed on. But in their memory, we'll make it a great event. So that's it for now.
That's good. Anybody else at the table like to comment? Adèle?
So I come from Bellevue, so I'm a Francophone. I come from the region of Batoche, so I'm Métis. I consider myself Francophone Métis. I've always known that I was a Francophone. From my youth, as soon as I went to school, it was pounded, that you were Francophone, was pounded in your skull. But I thought I was Métis, however. Before I was 16, 17 years of age, my mother began to do research, and I knew that my great-great-grandfather was in the provisional government of Red River. and then at Batoche. And so it was a great pride for me also to be able to work with many people who had the heritage, the culture in common with me. Say it in English. Shocks me.
In the greatest way possible.
To be Francophone and Métis, for me, it's being part of a community which is welcoming, which is proud of its heritage, of its culture. It's a language. It's so important. My French language. I get it back when I come to Bellevue to be in Ottawa. I improve my French, but coming back to Bellevue, I lose a bit of it, which it makes me a bit sad. But it's also a work you have to do. You have to work all the time to keep your culture. That's the biggest challenge, and that shows me a Francophone Métis from the region that I'm always working it to improve myself in that. Thanks very much. I'd like to invite other people to speak. Mr. Bruce, thank you.
I'm very honored to be chosen to sit here. We're supposed to be to sit around a round table, but now we find ourselves sitting around a square table. But that won't change anything. I was born as a Métis in the Bellevue community in French. For a few years, took my schooling there. In '58, I happened to move in this area, the Batoche community. By '61, I started working at the Batoche National Historic Park. For 2 years, I was working under somebody else. By 1962, I was left all by myself, all alone, at the Batoche Historic Site as a Métis person to run the park by myself. By '64, I started getting my first intern. Build it up to what I had to supervise was 15 interns. And during that time, this is where I learned what a Métis person in a community could learn or operate at a site at that size. So I was very fortunate to work with different people, all nationality were coming to me to work at the Batoche Historic Park. I was very fortunate to have this job till 1994. Thank you.
Merci.
Henri. Yesterday we talked a lot about language, the French language, the Métis language, and I'm really impressed to see how that has evolved, or not evolved, from my grandparents who were in the presbytery here, worked with Mademoiselle Derval, who was very strict as a grandmother for their pronunciation, and they rapped my knuckles when I didn't say things right. And so in the school division, we still talk about Métis. That's not evolved a lot. I think that is really interesting to how we look outside yesterday, and I think it's going to rain. I think it's going to rain this evening, and they looked outside from outside. It's going to be humid. It's the same thing, but we're proud of saying things differently. And we in the reunions of Francophones, we try to improve our French, but in Bellevue, it's this, we're probably speaking the same way with that accent. Thanks. Merci. Thanks, Henri.
I'll go last because I work with a bunch of women, so I'm used to going last.
Careful, Scott.
I'm protected by the tables. Well, like Adèle was saying, I'm also French and Métis, and I actually found out later than her. I only found out when I was like 22, so that I was Métis. I knew I was French. I went to French school. My parents always spoke French and all that kind of stuff, and I was really proud about that. And when I found out I was Métis, like, I thought that was really cool because I always learned a little bit. Like, I learned about Batoche in school, but not very much. And when I found out it was something I really wanted to learn more about, and I wanted to learn more about myself through that, and I found it very hard because there's not a lot of information at hand about Métis people, which really, well, it sucks. And I don't know, like, I am proud to be Métis. I tell everybody that I'm Métis, and they're like, wow, Scott, that's really cool. You're awfully white to be Métis. I know, but it's true, trust me. But it's something that I'm really proud of. And growing up as a French person, I didn't experience any hardships for being French and Métis like other people have talked about. And I think that's just the way that the community is changing as a whole, and people are becoming more accepting of the diversity of Canada, which is a really good thing. I'm not saying there isn't racism, because there's a lot. Don't misunderstand me. I'm saying that more people are more accepting. Like, I wouldn't get kicked out of a party for going because I'm Métis. That wouldn't happen now, as I know. I never have been. Hopefully it doesn't happen, because that must have been terrible. I couldn't even imagine what that would be like. But I'm saying me growing up was easier than you guys growing up. I think that's what I'm getting at. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, panelists. We've had an opportunity to hear, I think, from everybody around the table now. If there are people in the audience who would like to talk, I would love to be Oprah Winfrey and say, yes, what would you have to say? Maria Campbell.
I grew up in West Side in a Road-Lowndes community, like many of the people who are here. We were not privileged in growing up in a community where there was just Métis people, or there was people who had a different identity. In our community, there were people who were Métis. There were people who were half-breeds. We were Catholic, some of us, and some of us were Anglican. And there were also Métis people who practiced the old religion of their grandmothers. We didn't own land. We were not allowed to go to school until the mid-1940s because we were not taxpayers. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand. When they think that Métis went to school, they're thinking of communities like Île-à-Croix, where there were schools and those were established communities. But if you were not a taxpayer, you were considered a squatter. Most of the people who lived on road allowances were descendants of the people who were at Batoche. And those people paid a big price for their families being involved in that. Now, I don't want to sound like bad news, wicked witch of Batoche here, but you know, we're being very kind to each other, and I'm saying this with the greatest respect for everybody, and especially the organizers of this conference. But I think we need to, if we're going to develop a relationship, we need to talk about the issues that have really kept us apart. when people say they suffered a little bit of discrimination or racism, maybe a couple of times somebody said I was called a frog or a Frenchman. I can't remember a day growing up when we were not called les sauvages because we were Métis people in a community. Being kicked out of stores, not being able to walk on the sidewalk with other people. That didn't just happen with Anglophones, it also happened with Francophones. And that dysfunction carried over into our families, because in our communities we were Catholic and we were Anglican. And so when Paul talked this morning about how we learn the language that's around us, that's really true, because we also practice those ugly dysfunctions on each other. And you ended up with Métis people who put each other down because some of them were Anglicans or some of them were Catholic, and ended up with those divisions, and even further created divisions by calling each other sauvage because our language wasn't exactly the same as other people in the community. In my community, we spoke several languages. Some people talked Michif, and again, Terry talked about the diversity in our language. Some people spoke Michif, which was mostly French and Cree, that mixture. But there were some people who spoke Michif, but they also spoke Gaelic in that mixture, or they spoke more Cree or maybe more Soto. So it was really diverse just in one small community. And that's not just my community, that's communities both in the south and central parts of Saskatchewan, because there were many Road-Lowndes communities. People don't realize that in the 1940s, those same Road-Lowndes people were kicked out of those communities. Many of them, their homes were burned down and they were relocated to other places where nobody wanted them, and they had to move again. There's, you know, when Scott said there's very little history of Métis people that he can find, that's really true, because most people don't know that. They know the fur trade history, but they don't understand the contemporary history of our people. In the 1940s, people were loaded up in cattle cars and moved out of their communities, and they watched their communities being burned. You know, racism, it's still there. To say that there's no racism in our community today is wrong. People still get kicked out of places because they're Métis, and that happens to them from all of these different relatives or kinsmen whose blood runs through their veins. We're very nasty to each other. We're very a lot of the kinds of issues that we face today in trying to establish our nation comes from that kind of ugliness. But the really important thing is that our culture has been able to stay alive. I don't know how. I often marvel at how we've been able to be strong through all of that diversity and still, like Simone says, be able to laugh and maybe that's what's been our salvation, is that we can laugh and tell stories and continue. But we need to talk about those kinds of things and how do we make those changes. I remember reading something written by an Irish poet who said that nations are not built in the Houses of Parliament, but they're built in the way that people laugh and talk and make pilgrimage together. And I think that's what we're doing here. But we really need to talk. I'm proud to be Métis. I've always been proud of that. I'm proud to be a half-breed. And I'm proud that my Michif has a lot of Cree in it, because I'm very proud of those grandmothers that made me a mixed blood woman. But my feelings are not any more generous toward the Francophone community than they are to the Anglophone community, because I grew up next to a French community and they treated us every bit as bad as the English community on that side. And I just wanted to say that and understand that there were many, many communities who were totally dispossessed, who had no land and just moved around from place to place like a bunch of gypsies and were totally invisible in this country. And many of those people are responsible for our organizations today and our institutions, and that's a reality that we still live with today, because we still do those kinds of things to each other. So I needed to get that off my chest. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Oh, okay. We'll get a response in then. Thank you. We'll get a response from Paul-Émile, and then we'll go.
Well, I don't know. Well, maybe it's a response, but I hate to think that it was a national ethnic thing, you know, the way the French treated the Métis and the English treated the Métis. I think it was a generational thing. I think in the past, a lot of crazy things were going on. For you'd shoot people for stealing a horse. People were hanged for stealing, jewelry from the rich people. We did some crazy things in the past. I've seen a lot of change, you know, as a teacher. Scott was talking about, you know, he didn't see those things that Terry saw or I saw. No, it's not cool today. It's not cool to be a racist. J'ai entendu ma mère appeler faire allusion aux sauvages puis aux... Qu'est-ce que tu fais des plants de nègre? Des plants de nègre, quand j'étais jeune, je ne savais pas qu'est-ce que c'était un nègre. Tu sais, nos parents avaient puis nos amis.
Our grandparents, this mentality, racist mentality, we're better than they are. It's a class system of class. Says English from England, for example, and people are much more proud today of who they are, whether they're Francophone, Ukrainian, Polish, Cree, Métis. So things are improving, and there'll be lots of changes. And we must not forget the past, because we don't want to repeat the same mistakes. But as far as I'm concerned, everybody around the table feel pride. Les choses s'améliorent. Thank you, Paul-Émile.
There has been many years wasted in regards to getting rid of racism in our civilization in Saskatchewan, but for somebody to believe that it is gone is not really looking at where the racism happens. And as far as where it happens, nobody wants to go and see where it happens. Nobody wants to see where poverty happens. We have politicians that pledge to get rid of poverty, or that everybody will have a fair chance. But in the end, what happens is they always pick and choose. They don't speak to people where they think they might get an adverse conversation that they don't necessarily want to hear. And I think it's highly time that people just looked at the very facts of life that we have lived. And now I'm not saying that I have been horribly unhappy. As a matter of fact, it's just the opposite. I've been almost totally happy. What I don't like is the things that have happened where society turned a blind eye, and my own people who I worked hard to see that they could get an education and go to university in those places. I don't talk like this just at gatherings like this. I stand in the middle of a political party's convention or their meetings or where they're electing candidates, and I tell them that. History has been mentioned here. As a matter of fact, I think a little too much is leaned on this way past history. For one thing, I know I probably won't be spoken to for the next 20 years, but I'm going to say it anyway. There's one thing that the Métis people and the First Nations people have never done. They have never been caught in a rusty old ship or a rusty shipping can trying to sneak into somebody else's country. We have never run away from our difficulties. We are trying to solve them here. Hopefully this will be a step towards that direction, because I hope you will understand that if you don't look at the bad, you will never change it.
Thank you, Mrs. Blondeau-Perry. Terry?
I'd like to thank Maria for bringing this to the next level, because one of my particular things was, now that we've dispensed with the hugs and kisses, let's get down to the crap. And there's been a lot of crap, and there continues to be crap. And it's alive and well, and we need to talk about it. We need to sit down and say, what is actually going on out there? We have an organization right now that works with Métis people, and we have some Métis youngsters who are going around in our community with fish bats in their boots. They got knives in their pockets because some of the white folks, and I'm not attacking the Francophone community here, I'm talking about people in general who are attacking them on the street. That's a problem. That's a problem that we need to deal with. Yes, we can start at this particular level and dialogue with one another and find out, but we've got to admit that there's something going on. If we don't admit that there's something going on, we can't do anything about it. Yes, I speak very passionately with this. Yes, I may appear angry because I'm damn mad. That's why. I'm upset with this. We like to go around hugging and kissing each other, but as Maria has also said, we're also very mean to each other. And it's tiring. I'm sick of it. So thank you, Maria.
Ça marche pas? Okay. Now, back to the audience, Monsieur Morisset.
Merci. If you don't look at the bad, you will never change it, you said. But does the bad look at you? It's something else. I just want to react very briefly to Maria's word, because I feel so moved by her voice. Let me tell it to her and to you all. It is such a sensible voice, and it is beautiful. That's the only thing I want to say. It is so beautiful. The first time I read Half-Bred, Half-Breed, many years ago, like 20, 25 years ago, it had, albeit the content, there was an appeal to it that I could never explain, Maria. Like a word that was familiar to us and that we were never told about. And besides, I was reading it in English. Of course it was written in English, but I was not understanding it in English. In which language? I can't tell, except it was a language close to the heart. Merci.
Thank you, Jean. Susan, please go ahead.
Last night, when I was listening to the music and thoroughly enjoying the different styles of the fiddling, someone behind me said, "Don't worry, we'll make you into a Frenchman yet." And I think the the point that my French is, I love the idea of learning many languages, and I respect all languages. But I think the fact that I was raised in English, primarily English, my father lost his language. My father lost his language for many reasons, and one, because they were trying to survive. Every day was such a survival for him. And I was really touched by my father's presence in the last couple of days, because some of these issues of loss of identity, language, and are still so relevant and seen throughout the communities, and especially with the youth. And I too am very concerned with the children and the youth, and the sort of the generations where it's heading with the gang development and so forth, and the poverty. It still sickens me every day, and it's still so obvious everywhere you go. I live in Rostern now, and sometimes when we go into stores, we still have problems. You know, we still have people looking at us, and we still have some of those feelings that it's hard to describe. It's hard to talk about, because it's really hard to take people to task on some of the racism that still exists in the communities today. So I just wanted to share, I really feel that the racism is still here, and I feel it. I feel it in many times. So.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Susan. And just to tell you, in a French community, yes, we live a certain amount of racism. Often, I've been told that when I spoke French to my daughter, with my daughter, they thought, speak white, parler blanc. It's an insult. So I think we live. I can understand up to what the Métis live to a certain extent, but I am very touched by what I hear, what I've heard up to date. Rita?
You know, after you listen to people, just as we said yesterday, you find yourself rethinking, I guess, what I originally wanted to share. But that's okay, and that's that, I guess, is an expression that I'm listening to what I hear, and the passion in everyone's voice about what's important. And I just want to revisit a point I made earlier, but first of all, want to acknowledge this passion that I'm picking up. Because I've worked for many years in the field of education, I've heard it often when people come together to address the issue of racism. People speak about how we are the same at a very, very deep level. We want the same things. We have the same needs. And when I say needs, basic needs for shelter, a place to belong, to be loved, to be respected, all those things. And we have aspirations as well, to be more than that, which is a spiritual essence of ourselves as human beings. And so when we come together, I can hear that. Our histories are important to us, our families are important to us, our cultures are important to us, our language is important to us, to all of us. I made a comment when I started about the complexity of this thing called identity, which is, I think, at the heart of it. And I think Paul uncovered it for me again this morning, not because I wasn't aware of it, but I think if we are unwilling to acknowledge the history of this country and the foundations upon which it's built, the thinking that's embedded in the legislation, in the politics of this country, we're dead. And because our relationships are shaped by it. The laws of this country are in many respects, racist. They denigrate all of us and what we're aspiring to. Merci.
Thank you, Rita. Darren Prefontaine?
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everybody for this discussion, because I do think it's a passionate and it's a necessary one. But I just wanted to bring up a few points about the pea soup, you know, the frog thing. What English and French people, it's a fight amongst other white men, and it was nasty. The Klan burned crosses against our people, but it's qualitatively different what happened to Aboriginal people. We can't forget that. Our people were still prime ministers. They were bankers. They were part of the Catholic Church that dispossessed the Métis people through the script system. We got to remember that too. The English took the boots to our people, our ancestors, les Canadiens, les Canadiens, but our people did the same to the Métis in many instances. In a community where I'm very familiar with, Willowbunch, I could tell you horror stories. My mother was a German background, and she told me a story one day about a French-Canadian priest who went and took pictures of all the Métis people, told them to disrobe, roll around in the dirt, and then took picture and then said, please give money to these poor savages. They need money. And what he did is he lined his pockets, or it went to French-Canadian farmers. And my own mother told me that story. And she's neither Francophone or Métis, but that stuck with her. I wished I remembered the priest's name, but I mean, stuff like that happened down there. And my cousin is over there, and we have people down there, and we don't know what happened on the ground. Were our people involved indirectly or directly? But we're all here together. We talk about our great-grandpa, my cousin Lorraine and I. He was a legislator from Quebec who went to Saint-Eustache, Manitoba. There's a gentleman named Raoul Mackay. He has a show called Les Voix de Métis on APTN. I was talking with him. He had roots in Saint-Eustache. My great-grandpa took his grandpa's script land through the church. Well, that was one of the most awkward moments in my life. Here this old gentleman from Manitoba comes, and I work at GDI. And we sat down, and it was really cathartic. But on the other hand, it was sad because this is our interrelated history with one another. And it was ugly in parts. Not always, but it was ugly, and we got to acknowledge that. Our people, the Canadiens, were good people. They were in a lot of ways, but they could be just as ugly as anybody else. We're all human beings. We all got demons. And part of the problem, I honestly think, and I hope I don't offend people, is the Catholic Church did a lot of the damage here. I've got a quote here from a priest who talked about the Métis being, you know, just, I won't even read it, but anyone wants to look at it. This was written in 1923, and Willowbunch Museum was selling this up until recently. You know, and Lord Durham said something similar about our ancestors not having a history. They weren't a people. They were, you know, just bad people. And the French Canadians, the Quebecois, still quote Lord Durham's report. Well, you should have a look at Père Rondeau's write-up about the Métis that was written in 1923 and republished in 1970. And sold in Willowbunch, Saskatchewan, close to my hometown, Rockland, Saskatchewan. And there's a place that's colonized. You should go visit that place if you want to talk about dysfunction. Willowbunch, Rockland, that whole area, that's a place in utter denial. And if there's a healing that needs to get done, I suggest maybe next time we go down there. I don't know how it'll end out, but these are just my points. I don't know where I fit in the grand scheme of things. I'm not Métis, I'm not a Francophone, but I do have, you know, French-Canadian heritage. My stepdad was Métis, so I've got some interest. I work at GDI, but I try to find linkages and find commonalities. And the racism is there. Go to Saskatoon, our big city. It's going to explode if we don't do something. That city. We have a child prostitute problem in Saskatoon. My girlfriend teaches women's and gender studies. Her friend works in the women's and gender studies department on par with Bangkok, Thailand. And that's Aboriginal girls. I mean, if you want to talk about racism, the white Johns are doing that to young Native girls. If the little white girls, we'd call in the bloody Canadian Army, the RCMP, we'd be cracking heads. So, I mean, here I am almost you know, I'm really upset about that issue because that's something I see. I work in the inner city. So we've got some demons, people, we got to overcome. And I hope I didn't ramble too much or was out of place, but these are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, so we have another speaker. Okay, Sophie, sorry, Sophie, okay.
Okay, I guess I kind of noticed that none of the Francophones at the table responded to the racism issue, and I think that that's partially because we don't know and we can't know. I mean, we can go in a store and speak French and have somebody say speak white, and I mean, it's happened to me, but at least I get to shut my mouth and pretend I'm not French anymore for a little while. Whereas if you're Métis or you're Aboriginal, that's there forever. You don't get to just shut your mouth and not be Métis anymore. And I just kind of wanted to acknowledge the fact that we're aware of the history and we're aware that it's ugly, as Darren said, and that, I mean, I live in Saskatoon and I can honestly say that I'm scared to go to the west side. And I mean, do I get a little depressed every time I go and look and see what's going on down there? Of course I do. I mean, that's my city, that's where I grew up, and to know that there's people living in conditions that are worse than some third world countries, I mean, how can we not do anything about that? And I mean, I'm just disgusted every time I have my little white friends in suburbia, along with my parents, say that it's not going on and it's not as bad as we think it is. And I mean, how as a Francophone can I help? Is it even related? But I don't know, but as a human being, how can I let that go on, you know? And so if we can talk about how we can help each other out as human beings, never mind the cultural relation and how we know each other and we're linked that way as human beings, how do we move forward on just a social level? I mean, it's just, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do, and I just feel a little helpless listening to all these comments and going, I wish I could do something, but that's just who I am. Whenever something's going wrong, I just want to do something. So, I mean, if we can work on that this afternoon, have a chat, I don't know, but that's my comment.
Thank you, Sophie. So we're going to have another speaker from the audience. This is just like dating, you know, you start to get to know the people around you, and then you find out they've got, you know, ugly scars they're going to show you, and you're going to love them anyway. They have habits you don't like, you're going to love them anyway. You talk about the things that are hard to talk about, and you're going to love each other anyway. And so I think that the hard question is, I'd like, Sophie, for you to feel very empowered by the conversation that's going on here. I think that your reaction is a very typical one. It's like, okay, like I feel terrible about it. What are we going to do about it? It's the what are we going to do about it part. It's the moving past it that we need to get to and say, okay, you need to acknowledge what's going on. We started today with talking about the pride in who we are, talking about where we come from and who we are, and how do you know who you are? How do you know inside of yourself who you are? And if your French language has carried you through that and it's maintained, it's not such a far reach to say, this is who I am, this is where I come from, this is what I stand for. If you have had your culture completely marginalized and you've been oppressed purposely through legislation, through racism in your community, through religion, then it's harder. Our people are finding it, are struggling for, okay, now we have to demand respect for who we are. And that's coming out in the room right now. And it's all good. I'm going to open it up for one more comment, and I'm wondering if you're all getting hungry or not frozen at any event. So after we hear from this individual, Francois, we're going to break for lunch.
Just that in most cases there was some instances where the government did sponsor the racism, and also racism was pushed by the church, but we have to remember those oftentimes were individuals, and also a lot of the racism oftentimes happens through individuals. Hopefully our communities have grown, that they have passed this stage of, saying, well, our society is more evolved than yours or whatever. There's also something that Mr. Chatrin also spoke of, and that's being taking political action about it. And I just remember that the French community just had a big meeting with the the French Canadian and Acadian Association out in Ottawa, and Saskatchewan put forward, we shouldn't be talking about us living as a minority anymore. And I was kind of surprised to see the question came out again. How do we cope as minorities? And I think it's part of that process. Eventually, we have to move forward, and we have to stop thinking ourselves as minority, because we'll paint ourselves as minority, and we'll never get out of that box. Okay, we are Canadian citizens. Je suis un citoyen canadien.
Listen, I have the right. I have the right to be a French citizen, equal opportunity, that I be French Canadian, that I be Métis. I am still a Canadian.
It takes practice, I guess, to put that into everyday life. I just remembered, I went out to Walmart, and you have these automatic checkouts. I hate going to in there and admitting going there. But anyways, I went, and I bought something. I bought some water. I was in a big rush, and I bought water. And I went to the checkout, automatic checkout, and you have the option, English or French. So I print French. And there's a loudspeaker there. It tells me, and I was in Swift Current, and it was like, I just put the spotlight on myself. But in some ways it's good. It's good for other people to know that there are other people that have a variation of culture, of Canadian culture. It's not only English out here. There are variations, and there are different races, right? And so I think the more we put it out there, the better it is for everybody, because everybody will have to come to accept there's a diversity of cultures out there, and that is part of that Canadian identity, right? This is what I had to say. Thank you.
Merci, François.
Welcome. Bienvenue à Batoche.
Bonjour. Yes, I'm glad that you came back to the table. It's a good sign. When we sit around a table like this, what we see, what is good, we see each other, we hear well. And what I realized this morning is that we have lots of things to tell, even if sometimes coming to different point of views, different life experiences. It's really important to let other people know that. So I'm glad it came out. People's participation come in, add value to the dialogue. I believe that when we do this, we can put together a sort of empathy. Maybe in the past, we were not sitting around the table to see each other, to get to know each other. So I hope this will continue. And at the same time, empathy, it's more sympathy. It's really trying to understand and see how we can gain from one another while having respect for one another. So now I will turn the mic over to Marilyn, but I hope we can continue to change, especially for French communities. There are things that worked really well at home. We could talk about that. I would also like to hear things, certain things that already exist within Métis community that can be used. I can't wait to see what's going to come out. There's nothing that is preordained, already written down that belongs to us. Let's do something. And here's Marilyn. Bon, alors,
French when I hear the translation in my ear the whole time I'm talking, so I have to take my earphone out. We started off on a very, very good note with the answer this morning. We started talking about, Mr. Perret talked about pride. And having pride in who you are and where you come from and how you hold on to that. And we talked about family. Passion always comes out in a Métis context. It doesn't matter what the reason is for the gathering. There's a passion that flows, that brings us, brings our voice very strongly to the front. There are divisions. We talked about divisions. There's divisions within our own Métis communities. There are divisions between Métis and French communities. And there are divisions between Métis and French communities and other people. One of the things, is Professor Chartrand still here? One of the things that we talked about in terms of uniting and moving forward is the thing that moves people forward in a united way every time and works every time is a common enemy. And so I'm not saying let's find a common enemy. I'm saying let's find a common good to work toward so that that we can take something that we put our energy into, that we are working towards something together. And my legal training has put me in positions where I have seen on issues that are extremely spiritual, physical, religious, political, like abortion, seeing sort of both sides of the people on those kinds of issues come together and work together on something where it looks like those two groups could never work together. In this room today, we have a lot of common themes coming through, and we're not that far apart in terms of the scale. I think one of the things that I would ask you to think about when we go into the dialogue this afternoon is, how do you wish other people would treat you as a Francophone, as a Métis person? Because the only way to actually implement that and live that is to treat others that way. So we need to come up now with a way to move forward in our relationship where we are treating each other the way we wish others were treating us. And so no pressure and trying to have fun. Susan will always have the word fun as her middle name for me because she's the one that said that we better be having fun while we're doing this. So let's have some fun, and let's be respectful of there's just some hard realities of where people come from. You know, my father's a very dark Métis man, and he's still followed around in stores everywhere we go. He's illiterate, he's not institutionally educated. That comes up in his life daily. And so there's lots of examples that we can come up with things like that. He can also do more math in his head than any professor I've ever been around in terms of math because he can't write it down. He has to do it in his head. So there's lots of good things that come out of that. So I think we'd like to turn it back over to the table. We'll use the same format as we did this morning. Have some general comments from the table, go back to the audience so that it's all of you are participating in the discussion. Again, if you're comfortable starting with stories, but one of the ways that you understand how to move forward is by coming up with something from your past that has helped you move forward. And I'm going to throw an example out there in case this is something hard to start with. The Michif language is something that we're struggling very hard to maintain and to reinstitute. The French language is institutionalized, and although your struggle is ongoing, you have a solid foundation, legal recognition, constitutional recognition of the language. Now that the French people, and I'm just using Michif as an example, but now that French is an institutionalized, recognized language, you know how important it is. There are youth here that are speaking it. I wish I could speak Michif. I wish so badly I could speak Michif, but I can't. What would you offer in terms of you can support the Métis people in terms of implementing and institutionalizing the Michif language. That's just one small example of where we could go with things this afternoon.
Oui, Susan, go ahead.
Thank you. Merci. One of the things that was mentioned earlier was about children and youth being here, and there's a number of little kids, and I'm thinking of the next conference. I would really like to see a little bit more of a structure for the kids and for the youth. I think it's important that they stay and have a chance to visit with elders and to hear the words that we're saying, but also I think we need to try a little bit more to get them together, and maybe it would take some leadership from an adult to bring this, to make this happen the next time, because I mean, every generation has their obstacles, and I think it was touched upon earlier, and I tend to agree there's differences in experiences, but it would have been nice if we could maybe do that and facilitate that a little bit more.
Very good point. Who would like to go on? Qui voudrait continuer à parler de son...
Talk about its history, bring ideas forth for our future. We're really in between right now. Monsieur Perret? I would like to speak French, but since my mother always said, if there's an English person in there, you speak English. So
I'd like to mention a few things. When I started school way back in a little school, we were 8 and that started school that same year. I couldn't speak a word of English. Most of them couldn't speak English, but among us there was one German and one English. We played together as if nothing happened. We were one family. We could understand each other even though we couldn't understand what they were saying. And I think we could bring ourselves back to that level of a family that get along even though we don't understand the language of the next one. I think this is where we should start from. Bring our culture. We have our French culture. You have the Aboriginal culture. If we put these two together, don't we have a culture for the Métis? And if we could prove that point that we have a culture for the Métis, I think we could move along forward together and be a people that I feel that we're all family here together. Like I was telling someone, I'm sure that more than half my relatives are Métis. And I'm proud of them. Find them in all sorts of life, but we always have quarrels within our family, and this is what we have to try to resolve. This is our result of our quarrel within our family, so we can move together.
Merci, Monsieur Perret. Je pense qu'on est en train de... Oui. On est en train de parler de la volonté, de la bonne volonté des gens, et on a tous ça en nous. Vas-y, Paul.
The question is, I think, that that I understand we're just talking about is to help each other, and the Métis community, the Francophone community in Saskatchewan. And it's a situation which is a priority in Canada. We're neighbors to the biggest empire, Anglophone empire, which is really oriented towards consumption. The culture is not important. We become like that. I think that we'll become too Americanized. Big melting pot. We have policies in this country not long ago. But we're going to promote multiculturalism and bilingualism, and the languages and culture was most important. And I think we've lost a lot. We're losing a lot. So what I like to see, I'd suggest, is that when we come to elections, it's our responsibility to know the policies of the parties, the Conservatives, the Liberals, and the NPD and the NDP, and so on. What are their policies towards culture, language? Because I think we're more or less in agreement that when we lose our language, it's the beginning of the end. Any language or any culture we want to keep, when we lose the language, that's it. I'd like to very much to see, talking about the Saskatchewan government, there should be the power, have the strength to say to the school boards, you don't have the right to do what you did in Northeast School Division recently, cut the programs, language programs, without consulting the parents, and all the children, all the young people in this province should have the right to learn a second language. And whether it's Métis or French or and like that way, we could keep our culture that we want to keep, whether it's Métis or French. Without the language, we're finished. Our culture is finished. So, each time we have the opportunity, we have to discuss it with the politicians, and so that our young people have the opportunity to learn the language. What I have province now, there's no excuses for cutting programs that we were doing. And the politicians have to know that culture and arts and language are important.
Merci, Paul.
So we've got a couple of themes coming out now. Find some commonalities and work on those. Support each other in ways when we're not together. Find out what election platforms are of people, so that if it's something that's supporting the Francophone community, that we support it as well. That if it's something that supports the Métis community, that the Francophone community support it as well. So we're moving along. Those are some good themes to start us, okay? Somebody else at the table would like to participate?
Sophie.
Alors, moi, je voulais juste un peu adresser la question de préserver
Like
la langue.
to talk about the question of keeping our language. I'm not just doing it because I'm the president of the Young Francophones, but I really believe that that's the future of language teaching, and that if the Métis community has a challenge to find its young people, they have to seek a way to which covers the development of the youth. We have to have councils, learn more about our inheritance, our heritage, and our culture. I don't know the institutions well enough to know what was out there, but I think that first of all, we have to create something for the young people so that they can develop and the Métis community and learn the language, because that's the first step we've made. I'm president of the Young Francophones that was set up in 76. So it's one of our first steps we took in the fransaskoise world to get the young people introduced in the French language. That's a suggestion I'd have. Thank you, Sophie. I'm interested to know what's going on in the Métis community for the young people. I know that Madame Campbell has left, but she was saying that she was going to make a trip with young people to show them how you can do fishing and picking raspberries and be in the woodlands. Who can answer that question to help us understand? Are there any organizations for young Métis people, to strengthen what we're doing? Can you talk to us about what's going on now?
Sorry, I always forget to push the button, and he always assists. Merci. There is Métis youth organizations, and I know that there is some representation in the north. But I was involved in writing a report when I lived in L'Orange, and it was the Northern Youth Strategic Action Plan, and many people are working on addressing the needs of the youth and the children today, and some are much more active, and I'll just do the best I can with what I experienced. But it all comes down to certain areas, and that's, you know, access to language. In some families, like I don't speak Michif, but in Cumberland House they speak Cree, but I don't. I wasn't exposed to that. My father lost the language for very significant reasons, and you know, racism and lack of opportunities, and it would be nice to see if we could have access to language classes, and I would like my family to have an opportunity, and like for everyone to have an opportunity to learn more than one language, which would be ideal, but Michif language is important as well as Cree. But we would have to have, because we live in Rostern, how would we do that? Mm-hmm. How could we possibly, you know, it would be difficult. I mean, we could have possibly Saturday afternoon classes and certainly make it a priority in the community, but the communities are so diverse, and we tend to migrate a lot, so it would be, you know, a bit of a challenge. I'm not aware in Rostern if there is any Métis youth organizations or groups, but there is Métis Kids. I mean, Duck Lake is not too far, and so for me and my family, that would be the natural next step.
I saw Rita and then Terry.
Well, if I heard correctly, you were asking a question, a specific question about where Marie may be possibly headed, correct?
Yes. And what is existing at this point?
What is existing with respect to, I think the specific event that Maria is heading to is a youth camp that has been organized by the Métis in the northwestern part of Saskatchewan, very much concerned about the well-being of the youth, and of course part of that being what's happening to the culture and the language, but it is more than that. It is also about the kinds of choices that the youth are making in the north. And so, but it is an open youth camp, and we have, you know, there are kids that come from across the province, and likely, in fact, I understand there are youth that come from out of province as well to that camp, because it's become known.
Yes, I'm the, the president of a charitable organization, the Canadian Métis Heritage Corporation in Melfort. And through that particular corporation, we run day programs as well as an alternate school. And we invite all people who may be interested, and so it's just not specific to Métis young people. It also takes in First Nations, non-Métis, non-First Nations youth, and they do things like canoe trips during the summer. They go on some varied day trips to historic sites. They also will do things like enter a float in the parades around, to be involved in some sort of constructive activity. And they try to form, I suppose, their identity through activity. And it's one of the small ways we're trying to maintain who we are. They've also have done some live theater productions which they've offered to the community, which has again brought up their profile within the community. And it has been relatively well received. I say relatively well because it's still in its growing stages, and it is going ahead. So I think there are things that are happening in a number of different communities, it sounds like, and which is a really good thing. And I'm glad that this discussion has taken that particular tack, because one of the things that is happening is that we need to see positive strides forward. Thank you.
Merci, Terry. Are we ready to go out?
Anybody else at the table? And then we'll go right out to the audience.
Mm-hmm. Bon, je pense qu'on peut aller à l'extérieur du cercle puis revenir. Ah, Madame Bouvier? Oui, vas-y.
Yeah, I was just going to add one more thing because I was responding to your question earlier, but just to reinforce, I think, a point that was made earlier that I think one of the things that we need to do is to be. It seems that we are very clear about what's important to us. That's what I heard this morning. Like it's we don't have to repeat that. There's some things that we share that are important to us. We want to maintain our cultures and our languages, and it seems though that the next step might be. I couldn't help but feel a little bit of jealousy, if I might call it that. But I'm beyond that. You know, I'm a mature, older woman, and I'm not jealous in that sense. When the presentation was made by Joan yesterday, talking about the infrastructure that the Francophone community has, and I think that is part of what our own community has been doing in a global sense as well. And there are pockets in our communities which do really wonderful things with youth and working with families in difficulty and that kinds of thing. And so it's the institution building that I was wanting to re-emphasize. I really think that's what when we create institutions and build institutions, such as Gabriel Dumont Institute for us, it carries for us our dreams in many respects, and it's visible to us, and so those are the kinds of things I'd like to see. And I also think there could be opportunities for the very topic we're on now, where there are exchanges, because obviously we need a lot more time than today to share all the stories that we can possibly tell each other. And finally, I guess I would just say that I go back to my own first language and the premise of the identity of the Métis in the northwest part of Saskatchewan is that we are iwahkutuya, miwahkutuan, which is the sacred act of our relatedness. And it isn't that I am related just in the sense of this person is my uncle or this person is my grandmother, but that we are related in a spiritual sense as human beings. And I think if we remember that, we can transcend many things, and we can support each other in the real political issues that we are contending with, which Paul spoke of, which continue to malign, particularly Indigenous people in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita.
Simone?
Hi. I'd just like to further comment on Rita's. It's so funny when in our community we have divisions among the Métis, the Dene people, and the government created those divisions, boundaries. Like, we're not welcome to attend First Nations gatherings because we're not First Nations. But when there's a crisis in the community, like a death in the community, everyone comes together. We don't see any divisions. Everyone just comes together. And it's so beautiful to see one another getting along. And I felt that today, especially when we put our heads down for a moment. I could feel the spirit, beautiful spirit, and the closeness, and it was so peaceful. In our community, it's hard to find anyone younger than 30 who is able to speak or even understand Michif language. When I moved back to Beauval from Selkirk, when I left Beauval, everyone spoke Cree or Michif. And when I came back in '76, nobody did. Everyone was talking English, and we lost our language. We are losing our language fast. They have a Cree program in the school in Beauval, but it's Cree. Like, I don't understand some of the words my grandchildren come home to say to me, because Cree is different from Michif. I don't know, when you first asked, how do you wish other people would see me as a Métis? Like a normal human being. You know, I can remember one time we were at Zellers. I'm not going to say the name of the place, but me and my sister, we kept being followed, or this intercom would come on, like code 1 or whatever. So we kept moving away from each other, and we played a trick on this clerk. She was following us. One would go this way and one would go. Sure enough, they had 2 codes out there. And finally I said, I'm going to confront her. So I went up to her and, are you following me? Oh, no, ma'am, I'm not. I'm just putting stuff away. I said, I hope not, because I have money to pay for my purchases. Like, just because I have brown skin, I'm not here to steal. So I think that's what we have to teach our children, you know, to be proud and not to be afraid to confront racism. I was going to say more, but I forget it. That's so interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Teach your children, teach your neighbors, teach each other. Live multiculturalism. If that is something that you support politically, then you live multiculturalism. We also heard, actually, youth often come up, right? And one of the things that I love about being at either any First Nations institutional setting or anything that half-breeds or Métis people put on, there's always kids. There's always kids. They're actually supposed to be here listening, learning, and I love that part of my culture. And so the kids should be here, and you're absolutely right. We should have something for them to be understanding on their own. Go to the community that you come from in this province and find out what exists there. I'm hearing that not so much specifically, but what's in your own community? Is there a French person in your community? Find out, how are they functioning there? Is there a Métis person? What are the organizations that are there? Support them, build them if there aren't any there. Getting to know each other over a cup of coffee in your living room will go an awful long way to understanding politically who we are, spiritually who we are. What else did I hear? Educate. Educate, especially when there's dissent. Again, Mr. Perret said, you've got to take care of things in your own family. Some things that were raised this morning, what can we do about those to mend those fences and move on? Because everybody does fight. I don't fight with people that I don't know and don't care about. I only fight with people that I care about, right? And so what do we do to mend some of those fences? So some really good ideas coming out of this right now that, so maybe we'll move into the audience again and then bring it back to the table. And so, Mrs. Blonde.
Yes, and maybe just to follow up on what you're saying before I go there, je voulais juste qu'on pense aussi.
Say that we should think also what be the conditions, the criteria? What would that take, as you said, Marilyn, to get together as neighbors? Is this what's lacking? I'd like to think about that. It'd be really fun to see what we can do with that. What are the criteria and the conditions? Let's say, which would be positive to make progress in our relationships.
Okay, I'm about to address you again. First, I know some of the things you talk about are probably necessary, but I think the basic help we need probably is to support our land claim issues. Land claim is important because I think it is important to our economy, and as long as the Métis people are at the very bottom of the barrel in the economic picture of this province and this country, I think we are going to be probably non-participating in our own country. We hear a lot of support for other countries over our radio station, CBC. But we, as far as I remember, I don't remember hearing CBC ever supporting the Métis cause for land in their own land. And I think that's one of our most basic, our most important needs, is that we settle the land claim issue, which I'm sure will inspire a good economic background for all our children. Thank you.
Darren?
I just wanted to add, well, I don't want to age myself, but about 10 or 11 years ago, I went to Quebec for a program for Francophones au Québec. Mon papa était Canadien français. Parce que ça, I had 6 free weeks of holidays in Quebec. And what's really interesting is that's something that could be replicated, because there are people in the communities. Couldn't we lobby? I don't know how realistic, but there's a network. I've worked at GDI for 10 years, and I deal with people in Canadian heritage, and the people running Canadian heritage are Francophones. Like, that's a portfolio that's given to Quebecois almost always, and from the line down, they're almost all Francophones. Is there a way that we can lobby to have similar programs, intensive programs, for people to go to communities like Saint Laurent, Manitoba, where they speak the language, or, I don't know, Île-à-Crosse, and pattern it on this Francophone or Quebec with Métis, sensitivities, and use the same system and gradually work to try to make our Indigenous languages on the same status as French and English as official languages, and lobby that and use that pattern. Because I could tell you the Aboriginal Languages Initiative, the Métis in Saskatchewan get $125,000 to preserve their language. We have to divide it between all the Michif languages. There's 3 that we work with. We haven't done anything with Dene. They speak Dene and Lalache. We haven't done anything in Cumberland House. They speak Swampy Cree. So that's not a lot of money for 40 to 80,000 people. So is there a way we can lobby to get into that network, to make like a long-term Métis bursary program as well? Because the language retention rates and assimilation rates for the Métis are probably 90-95%. They're not the 40 or 50% for Francophone or Quebec, So that was just an idea. Maybe we can all collectively work on that. Merci.
Sophie?
Yeah, I just want to respond to Darren's comments. I think it's definitely possible. And I think that, obviously, I'm sure I'm not teaching you anything when I say that if you if you have the time or the energy to go through the 3,000 grants on the federal government's little CD, there's thousands and thousands of dollars available for stuff just like that. It's just learning to meet the right people and to apply for those grants. And I think over the years, Francophones have become, a lot of us anyways, experts at spinning a web to get money. So, I mean, I think that whoever is interested, come and talk to me. I know a lot of people. Come talk to Paul-Émile. He knows a lot of people. Talk to Denis Desgagnés, who's sitting over there. He knows a lot of people. I mean, actually, one of the ladies who works for Heritage Canada is here today. Frédéric Beaudemont's in the back, if you want to go talk to her. You know, she's a program agent. Is that? Program officer for Heritage Canada. She gives out money. So go talk to her. I mean, yeah, because $125,000, I'm a little outraged. I mean, I work for an association that has 100 members, and that's our annual budget, so I'm a little ashamed now to share that with you, but definitely I think if that's something that's like you guys are having a hard time with, and obviously we've learned through the years how to do it, so just as I'm sure, I don't know what questions we have or what we need help in, but you guys definitely have your own expertise. Not saying that we're here to teach you, I'm just saying that if you have questions, we know stuff, so you can ask if you want to.
Oui, c'est un partage de connaissances, hein, finalement. Un partage. Paul-Émile, tu veux dire quelque chose? Après ça, j'ai deux autres personnes. Vas-y.
Well, just quickly on that same vein, we get a couple million, you know, and it seems like a lot of money for associations, but how much do we need to counterbalance the billions of dollars that the English media in North America, you know, I hate to go back to the United States again, but we've been getting assimilated so quickly from their influence with movies and the games that kids play. And when I hear the kids up north, a couple of years ago, a revelation that the young Cree kids up north are losing their language as fast as anybody else because of satellite dish TV, radio, music. It's unbelievable. That's why you have to, everybody has to join together to do it, or whatever, to lobby our politicians that we need more and more money to keep our, you know, Canadian heritage culture, Métis, French, everything. Otherwise, we're just going to become one big North American melting pot. And so you need a lot of money to balance that media.
Merci, Paul. François, and then Rita, and then Joanne.
J'aime entendre ce qui dit en autour de la table comme c'est là. Mais je voulais juste revenir à quelque
I'd like
chose
to come back to something which Terry mentioned a little while ago when he was doing canoe trips. I think that a big part of this to getting back the culture, that's like doing these canoe trips with leaders who probably speak Métis. And that way, because if you do it only in English, you're contributing to your own assimilation. The same thing for French Canadians. We have camps, youth camps, but they take place in French. So you have to be careful about the funding, but use the funds in an intelligent way. It's also a matter of a way to get back our independence and interdependence. Because if we become masters of our own culture, nobody else can come and interfere to tell us what to do. And as long as we always adopt the language of those in power, we're always subjected. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but thanks very much. Rita.
Oh, there's the other Rita.
I guess as a Métis woman, with children. We've been studied to death. We've attended roundtables on numerous occasions, and it feels like we're spinning our wheels because we never get anywhere as a nation, as a community. And I guess what I'm looking for here is some sort of guarantee that some of the discussion and some of the recommendations that are coming from these roundtables will be taken somewhere. I guess my first recommendation as you know, a Métis woman, would be that we partner with the French community in regards to them bringing us along, because we're playing catch up right now, not only with the French, but with the First Nations. And so what I would hope is that part of the partnership be that the French would be willing to share some of the models that they have used in the past to bring them to where they are today, to help us as a nation of people to start developing language programs, to start developing our own education system, because that's the only way that we as a nation are going to retain our culture, our heritage, and be able to pass it on efficiently and effectively to our youth. And when you look at the situation with the Aboriginal youth across Canada, I think it's important that we start reaching those youth now. I think one of the main problems with our youth is identity, and that's been mentioned around the table a number of times. And I think one of the things that we can get rolling here to partner with our French brothers and sisters is to start using their models and start moving our culture and our heritage forward.
Merci beaucoup, Rita. Joanne, and after Barb and Denis. Okay, je m'en viens.
Francine asked the question, what are we going to need so we can work together? We talk about will, we talk about respect, but I think that what's most importantly, we must have a confidence. We have to trust each other. If we want to work closer with the Métis community, I want to learn. I want to better myself as a person. I want to be a better citizen. I want to better understand and know my neighbors. So the trust aspect is very important. The second thing that comes into play, we have talked about the history, our history. But I am French today because I have the history, we have the heritage. And that's what makes you what you are today. Our heritage must stay alive. It does not control or limit what we are, what happened to us in the past. I could do it. We could always be victimized and say, I'm tired, I'm not doing it anymore. But a part of our progress as Francophone, as François said it tomorrow, we are Canadian citizens. We have rights. Everybody, every citizen in Canada has rights. And by taking the approach as citizen, I only ask what I'm entitled to. I'm not asking for the ocean or for the moon. When I hear stories, for example, Simone talked about somebody's following her in her store because she has dark skin, they think she'll steal. I mean, I'm sorry. I am so sorry to hear that. Next time, I'm not going to follow somebody who's crying because I'll be crying with her. Joanne, I'm sorry. I have so many thoughts since I'm here that I think that I'll go on and on and on. I'm trying to talk about just one idea. When Joanne talks about, when we talk about citizenship, those with whom I spoke this weekend know well that I can speak in either language, but when I choose to be in French, to be part of the fransaskoise team, it's because it's an act of citizenship. Not I'm a Canadian. I can do it in both languages, and I'm so proud of that. And I appreciate the fact that I can do it. But Madame Du talked about being a mother. I'm a mother too. When we're mother, we talk about things that are very important to us. You talked about guarantees. There is nothing that can be guaranteed. But in the area where I know I can trust is the area of education. A big hole that we have within the system is the knowledge, the learning, the Métis heritage. I didn't learn that when I was little. My child doesn't learn more. I won't learn more because it doesn't exist right now in French school immersion system where people there to learn social science studies. We talked about it today. When they're 7 or 8 years old, they learned that. Is that just to say, just to barely touch on it, why is it that Mrs. Campbell's work is not a compulsory material in a educational program? It's not treatise, it's not compulsory. When our French community want to go ahead, the idea that it's important to have a second language and that we work as a partnership, laws is important so that people and they finish their secondary school in 2 languages. We talk about the quality, the content of this learning. The young people learn not only how to write things properly in masculine and feminine, for example, in French, they got to know their heritage, the heritage of their partners, their neighbors, the cousins, a big family in Saskatchewan, so that have the political will. I think I've got a small role to play in that. It's one of the ideas I'm trying to bring forth. I hope others will join me to help me, to hold my hand while I'm trying to talk about it. So I don't want to ramble on. Thank you. Denis? We've been talking about money, language. We come from a culture where we talk, the one who loses its language loses its creed, its being. So we talk about the idea of the Francophone community to build links, to build bridges with the Métis community. I believe us as Francophone, we've got a lot to learn from what you learn. You live in a Métis community. The main element, core element here finally, that, the saying you lose your language, you lose your faith, I think it's wrong because you're here. You're alive. We have to go get what you have. You have the spiritual side is what holds everything together. We have to learn from that. It has to be an exchange.
I was so fascinated by the Francophone language. Well, I love all types of languages. And I joined in with a crowd last night and sat with them, and they were having so much fun in their language. It made me so envious. I was just hoping that I could speak that language too. But I want to give you just a sample of the way my language sounds. It doesn't sound like any one of your languages over here. I'll speak about my growing up days back home. Tenigi kitimak shinan, jis les enfants gitashinan, 8 les filles, 2 les garçons. Tinimana mishtahe gi note katanan. Kakyogi goini nan gi michinan. Les Suisses, les lièvres, les poissons, les chevreux. But mungi kashkita nan chimachiach chinipahayach kok les chevreux. Yank les sauvages. But gimesh kutoni kanan mana. Ni mama gros jardin ki yaw. li patak manamshtahigi kishchikeu. En sak de patak managimiananik li savage por peyak e shovrugi pe tamaka winan. Ik shipikumane ship machiach. And who understood any bit of what I had to say? Yeah. Any of the Francophones? I have tipu. But you understood every word. That's good. Yeah. Well, I just thought I'd share this with you, my language, because I felt out of place. Listening to all of you talk, and I thought, where am I from? I thought I was from space or something, because my language is so different from yours. But anyway, like, another thing I would like to ask is, I know some Métis organizations, just small little organizations, like from Yorkton, from Saskatoon, who are very much struggling. They try to do funding. They can't get any money from the government for even a hall or anything, so that they have to use personal homes, and every second Sunday they play a game called Baruch, and they pay $5 to enter in, and the winner gets $5, and the second place winner gets $2, and the rest is kept by one individual in the community. And they use this money when one of the Métis people is sick in the hospital, depending how sick they are. If they're really, really sick, then they take them flowers. If they're not too sick, then they take them a basket of fruit. And they've tried so hard to do a little schooling of Michif, teaching Michif, but they just can't get a hall. They try to do meetings, and all they do is fight. They argue with one another so much. They're so much envious. Like the head person is called down because he thinks he knows too much, or she thinks she knows too much, and it's so disorganized. It's just a pity to see something like that. It really is. And how I wish that you could share something with me that I could maybe help out there. Example is, what kind of functions do you do to make money for your organizations? And how often do you meet, the meetings that you have? And how do you organize your executive member, like the president, the secretary, and so forth? All those things I would really like to learn from the Francophone, so maybe I can somehow help out my kind of people, my Michifs down here. So, well, those was what, seeing as how we're here, two communities, trying to combine and help out each other. This is the questions I had for you, but I could tell you stories in my Michif language because I'm recognized as a storyteller throughout all the schools in Saskatoon. So, but we're not here to listen to my stories, and we're running out of time anyway. So hope you enjoyed my language as much as I enjoy yours. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Oui. Is there somebody who would like to answer directly to Mrs. Oak? Monsieur Perret.
Merci beaucoup. I enjoy all languages too, because around St. Louis we have the Norwegians, we have Germans, and my daughter would go out for Stax Canada, and you come to a place where there was little fellas this tall, and they'd talk in Norwegian, And she said, it's so beautiful, I can't understand them, but it's so beautiful that they do talk in another. I have a great-grandson that's only 3 years old. If I speak to him in French, he answers in French. If I speak to him in English, he answers in English. You know, I'm so proud that he can do both languages. But my main topic right now is, we were talking about money. Have you thought of having a community school? You know, in St. Louis, we became a community school. With a community school, you have other funds. And since in St. Louis we have a great majority of Métis, we've been able to bring in a lot of speakers that show the tradition and culture of the Métis to our students, which they enjoy immensely. We even brought in artists and that all comes through the fact that we are a community school now. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Perret. Oui, Scott.
Okay, also, I can't remember your name.
Madame Oaks.
Madame Oaks? Okay, you were talking about how groups can make money. One way that a lot of groups that I've worked with make a lot of money is by working bingos and just selling the cards. You can make a lot of money doing that if you get involved with, just talk with the bingo hall, ask how you can put in a group to be able to work bingos once or twice a month. It's not a lot of work, but you make quite a bit of money. Also, like Sophie was saying before, there's a lot of government grants that you can apply for. You just have to be able to find them. Probably if you phone some of the PA locals, they might be able to help you out, because I know they do apply for lots of grants and things like that. I don't know how many they get, but they do apply for a lot of them. But those are really easy ways of making money, applying for grants and working bingos. Or and also you're talking about a hall that you guys would need instead of using people's houses. Go talk with schools. There's so many schools in Saskatoon, and like especially the elementary schools that don't have their gyms booked 24/7. They are usually more than happy to lend you the gym. That's what I find anyway in PA. I can go talk with any of the elementary schools and say, well, you know, we want to have a meeting. We don't really have anywhere to have it. Would we be able to use your gym from 7 to 9 on Tuesday? And 90% of the time it's okay. So that's something where you don't have to spend a lot of money to get a hall. You can actually use it for free. Like, I know money is a big issue, but there's always ways around money. People are always looking to help out other people, even though we think everyone's just looking out for themselves. Inside, everybody's a good person, I think. And if you appeal to them in a nice way and you're doing it for a good cause, they'll usually help you out. Okay? So, I don't know.
Merci, Scott. Sophie?
Sorry, I don't mean to manipulate. Other quick suggestion for Madame Oaks. You should try the Francophone Community Center in Saskatoon. Usually, like usually we'd make a special deal or hand it out for free for people in our community, but I'm sure if they know that you're a nonprofit organization, they won't charge. And it's downtown. It's not a gym, but it's a hall. So if that's another suggestion for you, if you need the phone number or anything, just come talk to me.
Merci, Sophie. Ce serait bien
So
d'entendre
it would be
les autres
good to
participants.
hear from other participants around the table. You say yes. Are you ready to say something? She's absorbing. That's for sure. Yes, Lucille. We had a discussion here with this lady over there. We had a discussion with the ladies, and one mentioned that maybe we could, as French and Métis, meet here once more, not just for a table, but let's say we could cook things that people really like. We each have ways to do our own ways to do things, and we could bring some art, some things we make at home. Bring the children. We could have like a show aim towards something like that so we can be together. Yes, c'est une bonne idée, une très bonne idée. Be together. This is what counts. And really, when we're together, we can really find solutions. And when we talk about guarantees, I think that the guarantees, it really is to be being around the table by working together. The results, we're not sure what the result will be, to put a goodwill together. And I hope that at the end of the day, there will be ideas. See how we can continue to get to know each other, share food, share ideas, share the dialogue, continue this dialogue for concrete things such as a project, or it'd be interesting to see how far we could go
Est-ce
with
qu'autour de la
that.
table, il y a d'autres personnes
Around the
qui aimeraient,
table,
avant de retourner
for
dans,
example, is there somebody who
l'audience?
would have something to say?
Scott?
Scott?
Vas-y.
Yeah, the thing doesn't like me anymore. Talking about guarantees and stuff, I think one thing that came up that could be really easily guaranteed for next year is what Susan said first about how we should have things going on for children, because that would be the easiest thing to guarantee for Rita up there. I remember her saying that she wanted some guarantees out of this, and that's one very simple thing to guarantee. You know, having some games and things like that going on for children to have fun being here. Because if they come here one year and they have a good time playing games out in the field with a bunch of people, they're going to want to come back next year. And then as they get older, they'll remember, oh, that's right, I had so much fun as a kid. I'll bring my kids. And then we'll have more than 50 people here. You know, I think that's something that's really easy to do. So people that kind of organize this stuff, to get free volunteers, phone the PA or the Saskatoon Playground Program, phone the College of Education in Saskatoon, phone either SunTEPs. These are people that are always looking for volunteer things to do to be able to put on their resume so it looks good, you know? So that's just an idea.
Merci. Susan?
Sorry, I shut you off.
I like the idea of having activities for kids, but it would be really nice to see even more like enhanced programming, to come up with a set, like a bar set. We want to have storytellers, we want to have elders telling stories, we want to hear the language, we want to hear this, we want to give this opportunity for our children, and to have, you know, a certain amount of I don't know, traditional games or activities, the floral beadwork, to share some of the traditional arts with the community would be ideal. And as well, it would be wonderful if we could start to plan to transfer those skills and to share them as well. So that's all I had to say.
Merci, Susan.
I'm getting tired.
One of the things that's been mentioned to me a few times actually over the last couple of days is something that maybe was missing that we would do if it was a Métis cultural event and we were inviting the Francophone community to our event. There are protocols that we would follow, and there would have been a lot more ceremony at the beginning. And because this is Métis land, and land is such a central, crucial issue, and land has a spiritual component as well that we often don't talk about in our political back and forth, but that we would have had a formal welcome in a ceremonial sense for you. And so I would love to participate in something where the Métis community is inviting the Francophone community to come back, and we will greet you with the proper protocol that we know that we need to obey in our communities, and you will see how rich that is and where we come from. Masters of our own culture is something that was said by Paul-Émile earlier, and I think that when you take it over and you're looking after it yourself, other people don't come in and try to look after it for you. I think that's very crucial. Something that I just want to put out there for the organizers, as I'm listening to how are we going to move forward on this, what are we going to use in terms of activities to keep in touch with each other, how do we find each other again, those kinds of things. perhaps the University of Regina could take a role in developing some kind of a web page where events can be posted provincially, and this could get big, and I'm sure not trying to put something on the shoulders of the University of Regina exclusively, but we need a mechanism to keep in touch with each other and to continue this conversation, because you're going to be right. We're all just going to go home and say, oh, that was cold. It was good. And we talked to a lot of people. Remember that cold day we got together? So we don't want that to happen. So how do we get some momentum out of this? So some really good ideas coming out of that. One thing that I'm going to add as a mother who's homeschooled, and I have children in university now and have a 3-year-old, education, whether it's institutional or not, is crucial. And I would invite us as a Métis community to take some responsibility about creating something to present in the French schools for education on Métis. I think that's an easy thing to do that we can all participate in. And I just want to add my 2 cents. I got told not to do that, so I'll get my hand slapped later, but there's my 2 cents, okay?
C'est beau ça. Merci. Adèle?
You just mentioned education, which is exactly what I was thinking at that point. We don't learn enough about Métis history in school. Going to school in French, of course, we learn a lot of the French history. You learn about les colons qui viennent de l'Europe, which is all well and good. That is part of our history, but there's a whole other side of that we're missing. And I really felt that when I went away to university this year. I took up a Native Studies class, and it was one of the best classes I had all year, because you get all of this extra stuff that, even as it's my own history, I don't know it. That, to me, is one of the most important things that we should be working on, is getting more of that Métis and First Nations history put into the schools, because there's not enough of it. And along with the education, the history ties into culture and, of course, language. Harriet Oakes was speaking in Michif, and I was just entranced. I wanted to hear more. And I was inquiring today about wanting to learn to speak Michif. Now, right now, at this very moment, that's like top of my priority list. That's the next thing I want to learn. And for us, French is an official language, so we have that option. And I think speaking Michif should be an option that everybody has as well. Woo.
Merci. Vous savez, le temps passe très vite, hein, quand on jase.
Very quickly, when we're talking about around the table, I'm not surprised. It's very interesting. And unfortunately, I know there are people that would have many, many more questions, but we have to end. That's a good sign. I'm always an optimist. I always see the good side of things. So that means that there are questions, there are answers, and they will give us an excuse to meet again, to continue this dialogue. And surely those who are the decision makers that are here heard the wishes, the dreams, the demands, and we'll be able to bring something back to you. So I think with this, Marilyn, we should, do you want to have the last word? I know that you took 2 minutes, but you can go ahead and add. I thank you. It was a great pleasure to be part of this historical moment. Even if I started a new fashion, everybody had blankets. We're just missing a little fire. Thank you so much.
I would like to thank all of the participants here, the ones who are at the table and the ones who are seated in various places and are warming up outside. This has been an absolute honor to sit and listen and to participate in something that is so historical. You could feel You could feel sitting in this room that one day we're going to say, do you know how all that got started? It got started at that damn cold Batoche day when we were all sitting around in blankets. That's what we're going to talk about. There's footage of that. I'll show you. We were frozen. And it's going to be wonderful. I'm very, very pleased to participate in that. One of the things that, when we were working on the Métis election issue in Saskatchewan, one of the things that we saw clearly that was missing was an education piece. And one of the other people that was working with us was an ex-RCMP officer. And I just want to sort of tie my story in with what I've been hearing over the afternoon. How do we work with youth? We tell ourselves all the time that the youth are the leaders of our future. And I don't know about the rest of you, but it takes a blink of an eye for 5 years to go by in my life right now. And within a blink of an eye, the little people who are wandering about in the background, they're going to be making decisions about us. And in Saskatchewan, this is an interesting story. In Saskatchewan, we have one of the best records for seatbelt safety. Did you know that? Saskatchewan should be very proud of our record for seatbelt safety. Do you know why? Do you know why that? Because they went into the schools and they educated the kids. Because they knew the kids were going to go home and they were going to tell their parents, and their parents were going to say, where did you learn that? And how come the seatbelts are under the seat, Dad? Did you know we were supposed to be wearing those? And as a result of that, don't drink and drive, and the seatbelt safety thing was targeted at youth in Saskatchewan, and it has had the most success. So when we take action in our schools and educate our youth about our history, which you don't know where you're going unless you know where you've come from, re-implement our language, I just want to honor everybody at the table for being brave enough to put all the stuff that's hard to talk about. I think perhaps I'm hearing for the Francophone community that there are some harsh realities in the Métis community that maybe you haven't been exposed to in the past that are absolutely alive and well. Including our passion and our love for our culture and the fight for our future and who we are. So again, thank you so much for allowing me to participate. It was truly an honor for me.